And welcome back to The Correspondents on Voice of America. I'm Arcega in Washington. Well, finally, after a 2-year probe, a multinational investigation into the downing of Malaysian Airlines flight MH-17 en route from Amsterdam to Kuala Lumpur on July 2014 has concluded. The Dutch-led probe confirms the Boeing 777 was shot down over eastern Ukraine by a surface-to-air missile that was transported from Russia into rebel-held territory in Ukraine. Moscow continues to dispute those findings and denies any involvement. VOA's Henry Ridgewell now with more on what killed all 298 people aboard that ill-fated flight.
The conclusions of the joint investigation team are clear. Flight MH17 was shot down by an SA-11 Buk surface-to-air missile transported from Russia to Ukrainian territory, then controlled by Moscow-backed rebels. But key questions remain unanswered.
Was it an error? Was it intentional? Who was in charge? Who issued the order? Those are the subsequent questions, and that's what we have to explore.
The families of the victims have waited more than 2 years for answers. Hans de Boer's 17-year-old daughter, Elsemiek, was among the 298 victims.
Up till now, there were a lot of speculations, but I see this as something really, a big relief for me.
Russia has consistently denied any involvement and has claimed the airliner was downed either by a Ukrainian fighter jet or shot down from Ukrainian territory. But the evidence against that is overwhelming.
And for more now on the downing of MH17, we are joined once again on Skype by VOA Moscow correspondent Daniel Schearf. And right here in Washington, I'm joined by my good friend, VOA senior analyst Jeffrey Young. Thank you both for joining us today. Daniel, I'm going to start with you. This investigation, obviously, as you say, not sitting well in Moscow. What is it about this, the investigation's findings that Russia is disagreeing with?
Well, from the beginning, Russia has painted this investigation and a previous investigation by the Dutch Safety Board as being politically motivated, as being already making conclusions before they find evidence. And they've also pointed out that the fact that Ukraine was one of the members of the joint investigative team, along with Australia, the Dutch, of course, Belgium, and Malaysia, makes it a biased investigation, that they believe that Ukraine has been feeding false information to the investigative team, and therefore they're essentially making up facts in order to justify a conclusion that they've already made ahead of time. Right. That's the opinion of Moscow, and they back that up, of course, with all the Kremlin-controlled media here in Russia.
Jeff, I know you've been digging into this story quite a bit. So politically motivated, biased, what kind of evidence did the Dutch probe come up with that links Russia directly to this the downing of MH17?
The report used a combination of electronic intelligence, eyewitness accounts, and social media. They were able, with these elements and with other things that they're not talking about, and I'm sure that there's a lot of upper-level intelligence activity that was involved in this. The evening of July 16, 2014, there were intercepted telephone conversations with Russian separatists asking for a BUK missile system to be brought into their territory. So there is that electronic
record of communications beforehand?
There are.
Okay, and then what happens after that?
The missile, according to these accounts, was brought into separatist territory in Ukraine from Russia on the evening of July 16th. It was during the day of the 17th that the missile was fired and Malaysian Airlines MH17 was downed.
It's pretty clear that whoever shot down this plane must have thought it was something other than what it was, a passenger plane.
The reason that the separatists were asking for a BUK anti-aircraft missile system to be brought into Ukraine was they were fearing Ukrainian Air Force airstrikes. All right? Now, anytime that a missile like this is fired in a system like this, you have an acquisition radar. What is puzzling about this and difficult to explain is an airliner that is cruising at least 10,000 meters, if not more, is not an aircraft that is low to the ground and about to conduct an airstrike.
Sure.
And Their acquisition radar may have had the ability to discern the transponder. All airliners have a transponder, and the transponder identifies, this is who I am, this is who I am, this is who I am. And anyone who can pick this up knows what the aircraft is. And MH-17's transponder, according to accounts, was on and functioning.
It makes anyone who shot down that plane look very bad indeed. So Daniel, let me get you back into this. Apparently, Russia is now calling for a separate investigation. On what grounds? What kind of new evidence could they possibly bring forward here?
Well, just days ahead of the release of the JIT report, the Russians did come up with some radar data, which they say proves some of one of their positions, that the Buk was not launched from rebel territory, but was launched from Ukrainian-controlled territory. The interesting thing about that new piece of evidence, as they call it, is not only that it was suddenly discovered just a few days ahead of the release of this report, but also that it seems to contradict their earlier position about a year ago, where they were saying that it was a Ukrainian jet that had shot down the Malaysian airline, and that they had radar data showing that there was a jet in the airspace over rebel-controlled territory. The new radar data they released this past week showed that there was nothing in the air above the rebel territory, no Ukrainian jet, no missiles. So they seem to be contradicting themselves, but this has been something that's been a problem from the Russian side from the beginning as well, that they've been putting out a lot of different versions of what possibly may have been responsible for this terrible tragedy.
Jeffrey, I want you to talk about what we seem to be seeing is this pattern of denial, disinformation. We already saw this just a couple of weeks ago with the Russian airstrike against a UN aid convoy in Syria. Now we're hearing similar denials here in this case. Is this kind of a political pattern that we need to get used to when it comes to dealing with the Russians? What are you finding out?
It's useful for them to at times present as many different forms of reality as possible. If I give you scenarios A, B, C, and D, I can scramble the eggs to the point where the average person can't sort it out.
So the technique is confusion.
It is. And one of the more fascinating scenarios that was put forth from the Russian side was that this was a CIA operation, and that the airliner that was shot down had 298 corpses, people dead, on board the plane.
Stuff that doesn't really make sense. So give me the bottom line here, Jeff. What is the reason behind these denials? Is Russia perhaps worried about possible implications, legal ramifications of something like this? Could some of the families of the Dutch victims turn around and sue Russia? Is that a possibility?
This will be interesting to see. I think you'll have to look at the premise of, will they be able to avoid being sued and found guilty through sovereign immunity? And we have a case here in the United States that just happened in the last couple of days, where Congress passed a bill that basically exposed the Saudi Arabian government to possible lawsuits from people who were killed on September 11, 2001.
Okay.
And Russia may invoke sovereign immunity in this case. Collecting may be difficult, but again, one case to look at in the past was Lockerbie, Pan Am 103 Lockerbie in the late 1980s.
Daniel, I'm out of time, but perhaps you can answer this very quickly. Russia obviously appealing to the UN International Civil Aviation Organization, the ICAO, to reopen the investigation. Is that likely? Is that even possible? Is that something they might consider?
Well, it's a good question, but I think that we're going to see the Dutch investigation move further ahead. This
could be the
most
final
credible investigation that's come out so far, and they're going to be looking for suspects and trying to push Russia for answers. Russia is now claiming that it's going to provide more evidence and information to the investigators. Whether or not Russia is going to be willing to actually cooperate in terms of providing any details of where their boots were at the time, and where these suspects may be, and whether or not they'd even be willing to turn anybody over for questioning, of course. There's a big question mark there.
We shall see. Thank you again, Daniel Schearf, our reporter in Moscow, and to our senior analyst, Jeffrey Young. Still ahead, 1 down, 2 to go in the U.S. presidential debates between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. And just a reminder, we want to hear from you. Share your thoughts, questions, and comments on our Facebook page. The address is VOA The Correspondents. We'll be right back.